So
I think it even extends, you don't even have to be a healer, a teacher, or anything else. Just being a woman,
exactly, yeah,
and being, being called into a mother role, and within the family unit, if you aren't in balance, then you can develop your own real illnesses over time. Now, my background is a Reiki master. I discovered Reiki in and around the same time as you, interestingly enough, age 29, is when I started going down the Reiki path, which opened my mind to a whole new awareness. And about 6 or 8 years ago, I used to work for a cancer support center locally here. And I quickly noticed a theme amongst most of the clients that came to me. Were women, because at that point they were willing to ask for help. But there was a theme, because breast cancer, if you think about it, heart chakra woundings, and a continual abundance of nurturing, of giving, 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 serving, serving, serving. And the women that I could see that were going to really get themselves into a place of greater health and vitality were the women that were able to change their mindset from I need to serve everyone, I need to be a taxi driver, I need to be the chef, I need to be the cleaner, I need to do all of these things, to I need to take care of me now. I've never taken care of me in my life, and I need to, say, sorry, I can't drive you here. I'm going to have like an hour bath and take care of myself. And, this manifested in actual breast cancer for them because of this imbalance of giving and receiving of energy. So it can, over time, as you well know, it becomes first an energetic belief, and then it becomes a mindset, and then it becomes a behavior, and then it becomes a physical disturbance in our bodies, and we can get ill, actually physically ill, if we're not in balance. Do you see that a lot with a lot of the women that you work with in your practice?
yeah, definitely. I mean, I really believe that something like cancer is is an illness that comes from my uncle actually recovered from what was given a prognosis of terminal cancer and 20 years ago, and he's still alive today. And he says that cancer is a result of unfelt emotion, unprocessed emotions. So yeah, I definitely see that kind of an illness as being a result of not meeting your own needs, not feeling your own feelings, not acknowledging your own pain, particularly anger. I think women really struggle to express anger. That's been my experience with the women that I've worked with myself as well. We've
Well,
been
they
very much taught
struggle
to repress.
because they're told that if you get angry, you're being hysterical. Stop being
Yeah,
hysterical. They're not given the space or the room to express anger anywhere.
and that if your job is caring for other people, then if you're a really rampant people pleaser, you just won't get angry because it's all about them. you know
yes.
Even if you're really angry and something needs to come out, if you're deeply attuned to taking care of others, you'll literally repress your own feelings in order to keep the peace. And that for sure is going to lead to sickness. So yeah, part of my work with women is helping them release their emotions, and particularly emotions like anger. And often anger can actually even be seen as a kind of a masculine emotion, because
Yes.
men are not trained in that way. Men are taught that it's totally healthy to be angry, and that I should stand up for myself and ask for what I want, and ask for the pay rise, and realize I deserve lots of money.
Oh, yes,
Women
absolutely.
taught that. So yeah,
Society even kind of like, oh, they got in a scrap. It's all right. That's what boys do, kind of thing.
yeah,
We wash our hands of it and saying, whatever. It's just boys being boys. But if two women were to start scrapping, that would be a little bit more of a like, what is going on?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a big part of what I want to help women with is releasing anger, standing up for themselves, boundaries. So when I do my work with women in retreats, I work on boundaries. I work on helping them ask for what they need, ask for what they want, and not being apologetic, stopping this "I'm sorry" all the time. A lot of women are trained to be apologetic.
Whereas the masculine, it's more of an externalization. I'm just going to keep
Yeah,
pushing it out and throwing it out. And that's
exactly.
one thing I've noticed is women tend to internalize everything as something wrong with them or shameful or, and that's a difficult process because if you're internalizing that energy, you're welcoming in ultimately illness and dis-ease eventually over time. I'm very
Yeah.
curious what tools and techniques you would advise women to use to help them open the gateway to that sacred rage that I think most women are carrying with them. Statistically speaking, most women, I don't even know exactly the statistics, but it's somewhere up in the range of like 9 out of 10 women or 8 out of 10 women have had some sort of an experience before the age of 18 that was sexual abuse, sexual assault, molestation. And those get all repressed down, and then we go out into the dating pool, and then there's inappropriate boundaries, and those get all oppressed down. So there's a lot of sacred rage that women are carrying around that they can't and they don't know how to release. What advice would you give to somebody who is sitting in that energy that has had a lot of boundaries being crossed, abuses potentially, as well as traumas that they're carrying with them that should elicit rage? The response should be rage or anger. That's a
Yeah.
healthy response.
So I would say the first step is actually just getting in touch with it. So I think if we've been trained our whole lives inadvertently, so consciously or unconsciously by our family or our society or our school to repress that rage, we might not even know that we have it. So the first step is literally just to get in touch with it. And meditation I find to be very helpful for that process because you're just giving yourself a deep, long space to connect in with you. And if you do a kind of a purposeful meditation where you're like, okay, I want to get in touch with my rage. Do I have rage? Where is it? What is it? What is it from? And so that would be my first advice to, okay, do a meditation, ask to be put in touch with your rage, in communication with that rage, understand what it is, what it's there for, what it's in response to. And then in terms of, okay, how to deal with it. And this is very much my experience. I think I was not able to express anger until very recently in my life because I literally had been trained to not do that. It's quite a big process to move from a space of being a person who's almost not able to express anger at all to slowly moving into a person who, particularly in relationship, when something happens, is able to respond. So that's basically moving from freeze response, which has been my normal response in a situation where I'm being threatened by someone, where I'm being treated badly by someone. My normal trained my whole life response is freeze. So to move from that freeze to expression, it's actually a really big deal. It's actually a really long process. And I would say what's helped me has been screaming out my rage in a safe space. So in a forest or in a car, where I'm by myself, just screaming and yelling, whatever it is I need to get out at whoever person or whichever group, doing that practice. So just that practice of, okay, this is what it feels to be angry. This is how it feels to express that anger in private by myself. And then when it comes to with other people, I actually, in my relationship, which has recently ended, which is another story, but one gift that I received from him, he was a person who, my partner, who was very okay with getting into his anger and his rage. And he actually helped me sort of, he would take me through, be like, okay, scream, scream, okay, more, get it out, come on. So he kind of helped me with that channeling my anger. And then in our arguments, I started to be to get more easily stand in my truth and in my anger with him. Obviously, there's a limit, you know, if in a relationship you end up screaming and yelling at each other on a regular basis, obviously that's not healthy. So there's a line, a fine line and a limit with everything, right? But if you're a person who's recovering from being repressed anger your whole life, you need to actually step beyond that limit of reasonable expression. You actually need to allow yourself to go a bit, to let it all out, because you've been the opposite your whole life. So if you can find a person, like it might be your relational partner, it might be a friend, it might be a workshop facilitator, you can find a person that can actually hold that space for you to just scream and yell, and that person can be non-reactive, and that person can show you that it's okay and you're allowed to be angry in the presence of another person. That is super helpful. And, you know, the more that you can do that, the better. And then I guess the third thing I would say would be just to practice saying no more often and with no apology or explanation. So you can even practice that in kind of fake ways. You know, people ask you if you want more food at the restaurant, you say no. People ask you if you want a coffee or a this or a that. And if you're a really rampant, strong people pleaser, like I've been a little bit, you kind of want to make people happy. So you just say yes to little things like that, which you don't really want to say yes to. So just practice saying no more and more to small things. And without making any explanation, any apology. And then you slowly start to just get much better at just saying no. And that's also a really clear boundary. And then if you're being if you're in a situation where you're being treated badly by somebody or being abused by somebody, your inner no comes out and you're like, no, no, stop. You get better and better and better at standing up for yourself.
Yes. I'm interested in your perspective because I've really noticed a massive shift in the last at least 5 years, if not even before that, but really the last 5 years of more and more women becoming empowered and learning to say no, walking out of relationship, standing on their own and saying, I'm not going to do this anymore. Myself is certainly included in that mix, but I have observed around me a mass shift. Have you observed this shift as well? And where do you see the feminine energies moving?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a shift really in our generation, even really. That there's a lot more single women out in the world than there ever has been. And I think it makes a lot of sense because we are kind of, maybe our parents, maybe my mother, but maybe we are really the very first generation, especially in the Western world, of women who are born into a political space where we have rights to work and earn money and own property and all these things which are relatively new for women. We're the really first generation that has those full rights in the Western countries. Of course, in many countries like Afghanistan, the women still don't have any of those rights, but in Western countries we have them. So we are liberated in terms of we can be on our own and take care of ourselves. We don't need a man to do that anymore. And it's really groundbreaking. We really are the first generation in that situation. So I think as a result of that, there's a lot more single women now, our kind of age, out in the world, because they don't need a relationship in order to survive. Yeah, we don't need the relationship in order to survive anymore. We don't need the man to provide for us. We are at choice. Yeah, we choose. Okay, is this good for me? Is it not? So as a result of that, I think the healthy result is that there's a lot less dysfunctional relationships because women are not forced to put up with them. Yeah, they can leave. They have resources. They have access to jobs, money, work. They don't have to stay in bad situations. So I would agree with you. I think we're the generation probably with more single women than ever before. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's definitely a good thing, I think, if women are not forced to be in relationships which are bad for them. And I think it's also, on the other hand, good for men, because if men recognize that, okay, this woman doesn't just want me as a provider for her, doesn't just want me as a kind of a bank or an ATM. I have to show up as a fully grown adult man, emotionally available to provide a real experience of love and connection. So I have to step up and do that work to be a good person and to be somebody that this woman actually wants to spend her time with. So that's also good for men, right?
Yes, well, I think it's good for society as a whole, because as women are shifting, women are leading a new way of being. You're 100% correct. It means that men can no longer just sit back and say, yeah, okay, I'm going to do bare minimum in this relationship. Women are like, oh, hells no, I'm out. So
exactly.
that increases the energy for both, which is you get into the topic of pulling themselves out of toxicity on both sides of the coin. I don't subscribe to just men are toxic. Women have had their own toxicity. If we didn't have toxicity, we wouldn't be in relationship with toxic men. Like attracts like. Yeah. And I personally know that experience from trying to pull myself out of an abusive marriage. There was something in me that was tolerating it, codependency. So as I raised I'm going to heal this, that means any man that's going to come in to be with me has to be in an energy that's a healed energy, which then ripples out into everything. It ripples out into how people are raising their children. So the next generation of children are going to be already in a much higher vibration. They're not going to be carrying on those same generational toxic patterns, so we're clearing out society as a whole and rebalancing. I'm hoping, with more equity and more equality and more, shared vibration, matching of vibration, which is going to be for the betterment of all. It's going to infiltrate everything, not just relationship, but how we show up in our medical communities, how we show up in our schools, how we show up in politics, when everything becomes a little bit more balanced. So do you see this as like the precipice, because of our generation, as pulling patriarchy back into balance and rebalancing? And that's the way I see it. The age of Aquarius is about rebalancing those feminine and masculine energies.
Definitely. And I think there's a lot more work to do for that sort of balance to really shift, because I think we're still kind of here with the patriarchy up here and women kind of more down here, but slowly it's slowly coming into balance. And I mean, in Australia, we had our very first women's prime minister only recently, Julia Gillard, in 2010 until 2013. She was the very, very first woman prime minister, and she made this most amazing impact in Australia and in the world. Actually, she gave this speech called the misogyny speech. I don't know if you know it, if you've seen it, but she gave a kind of inadvertent, off-the-cuff speech in the Australian Parliament about misogyny to her opposition leader, who was the man opposite her, the leader of the opposition. She was the prime minister at the time. and this leader of the opposition, who was a very sexist, very misogynist, very disrespectful man towards women, like huge disrespect. He actually accused a member of her parliament, a man, of being sexist. And as a result of this accusation, she stood up and gave this most incredible speech on misogyny and on sexism, you know, basically saying to him, who the hell are you to stand here and speak to me about misogyny when you are the one of the most misogynist, sexist people I've ever met in my life, you know? So yeah, things are changing, but slowly, yeah, because I mean, that's Australia in the 2000s, you know, this is only 10 years ago. This man, the opposition leader, he would literally stand outside the parliament, the opposition, the leader of the opposition, next to a cutout, a cardboard figure of this woman who was the prime minister. And there would be words saying, ditch the witch.
Oh, yes. Oh, dear.
You know, I mean, this happened 10 years ago in Australia. You know, this is misogyny on full display in politics, in the leadership of a country. And you know, that's somehow permissible for a person to behave in that way towards a woman who at the time was the leader of the country, you know. So I think the disrespect is just beyond belief. But it's as a result of literally generations and generations and generations of sexism and patriarchy and rampant disrespect towards women, which has been allowed. So I think it is changing, that this balance is changing, because women like her do step up and take power and speak truth to power and say, hey, this has got to stop. This is off the show crazy. But I think there's a lot more work to go. Like, there's a lot, we've got a long, long way to go before we really come to this place of balance. But I'm also really glad that there's women like Angela Merkel in Germany, you know, who was the prime minister there for a long time and was very respected and was never treated with such disrespect as our woman prime minister in Australia, you know. So there are other countries which I think are further along in this path of redressing the balance of patriarchy and sexism and uplifting and supporting women to step into leadership roles and to demonstrate that we're all equals. We don't need to oppress each other anymore. I mean, because ultimately at the bottom of this whole patriarchy thing is it's also really bad for men. Yeah, it's bad for men to oppress women. It's bad. Yeah. Nobody's gonna feel good getting their power from oppressing another group, whether that group is women, whether that group is another race, whether that group is a different sexual orientation. That's a very bad place to get power from. Yeah, that's not true power. That's abuse. That's oppression. It's terrible for everybody. So I think that when men en masse can recognize that it's really also toxic for them, this patriarchy, this sexism, this misogyny, this woman hating, then we're going to see this shift come much faster. And I think probably the younger generation of men, like the generation under us, is probably a part of that change. I think that's my feeling. There's a lot more young men who are like, okay, yes, we are part of ending patriarchy. This is not a woman's job. This is our job. We want to maintain this balance. We want to redress this balance together. We want to rise up together, and we want to end this toxic patriarchy stuff.
Yes, I'm very blessed to have some of that generation in my house with me. And their views on the world is very, very different than the way that we were raised in the 70s and 80s and, you know, earlier or later, depending on your age.